Hello and welcome everybody to the Extra Point Podcast. Today is December 5th, 2014. I am Andrew Goldberg and I'm joined as always by Adam Levin, Zachary Benau, and Michael Green. We all work for Fox Sports covering different divisions in the NFL. I cover the AFC East, Adam covers the NFC North, Michael covers the NFC South, and Zach covers the AFC South. We got a lot of perspectives, as always, on this. And you can tweet at us for me at ADBird12, for Zach at Zachary Benau, CH for the Zachary, and BENAU for Zach. And then Michael Green, you can look at his LinkedIn page and connect with him and do all that type of fun stuff on LinkedIn that I never really understand other than promoting stuff. But we have a lot to cover today because last night was Thursday Night Football. Also, RG3 continues to ruffle feathers in Washington. And the Browns stick with Brian Hoyer as their starting quarterback. But first, let's start with Dallas and Chicago. Last night, Dallas earns their 9th victory of the season, which means that they will have a winning record for the first time since 2009. That's the first. All the other years they went 8-8, which is actually incredible that they did that. But last night they won 41-28. It was essentially a blowout until the end. Romo had 205 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Jay Cutler 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Marco Murray had 41 total touches, 179 rushing yards, 49 receiving, and 1 rushing touchdown. Forte had a bad game, 26 yards. A touchdown, but a lot of catches, 8 catches, 74 yards. Brandon Marshall looked to be dominating early, but left with a rib injury, and Adam will update you on that after we go through the rundown. Cole Beasley came out of nowhere, 42 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dallas had a 14-7 lead at the half, then scored 21 unanswered points. And then, I was following this game, guys, and I actually stopped following it because it was a blowout. And then all of a sudden I saw on Twitter that Orlando Scandrick, the Cowboys cornerback, had a key interception in the game. And I said, what's so key about an interception late in the game? And then I saw the score, and the Bears almost came back, and that interception was huge. But now that the Dallas Cowboys have won, do you guys really believe in the Cowboys, or do you guys still need to see more, especially after last week we were off because of Thanksgiving? And I should have said happy Thanksgiving to you guys, but happy belated Thanksgiving. But do you guys believe in the Cowboys, or do you need to see more?
Personally, I still need to see more. I think being the Bears, granted it was a road game, but being the Bears is nothing to write home about. The Bears are awful, as we have touched on this. Cutler is awful. Their defense is awful. They obviously lost Brandon Marshall halfway through the game. So I'm not totally convinced. I think if they can, the way they played Thanksgiving at home in such a big game kind of took me off the Cowboys bandwagon. So unless they can go into Philadelphia next Sunday night and pull out that game, which personally I don't see it, but if they can, then I could be convinced. But I see some tough games for them coming up, and I'm still not sure they're going to make the playoffs with their last few games against Eagles, Colts being at home, and then they finish with the Redskins, which they should be able to beat, but we all know Redskins, Cowboys, in a make or break for the playoff game. The Redskins are going to go all out. Could be tough for them. So I'm not totally on this Cowboys band. Got to see more next Sunday against Philly.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. I think I buy them being able to beat mediocre teams like the Bears, but I don't see them performing well against the elite NFC teams. I think they'll go as far as DeMarco Murray and their offensive line will take them, but don't trust Romo's back at this point. He was efficient last night, but he was still doing a lot of checkdowns. Obviously, it's still a concern. And that late letdown by the defense, I haven't been sold on them all season, and I'd be concerned about them going up against a more efficient offense going forward.
Yeah, I think we're gonna all three be here in agreement here. That Philly game, Zach, you mentioned it. That Philly game on Thanksgiving was a little shocking. I was surprised that Philadelphia was able to get after Dallas or after Tony Romo so well, considering how well the offensive line had played. That defense really looked bad in situations where they needed to get Dallas off the field. So, yeah, I was shocked, and I'm worried about them in Philadelphia next weekend, especially if Philly has a good showing against Seattle, win or lose. Maybe they can still make the playoffs. They built up 9 wins now. They don't have the hardest of schedules down the stretch, at least compared to some other teams in the NFC. So maybe they can make the playoffs, but I don't know if I buy them going that far in the playoffs. And I think I'll buy whether they can even, whether they're going to struggle to make the playoffs or how deep they're going to go based on how they do against Philadelphia next Sunday. Those were the two tests I was looking for this team for a while, and we found out last week, and we'll find out again next week. But on to the loser of the game, the Chicago Bears, a team that I cover for the NFC North stuff for Fox. It's time to blow it up there. This has been a massively disappointing season. You mentioned it early on, Andrew, but the breaking news is that Brandon Marshall, who left that game early on, with what looked like an inconsequential, little hit to his back by the knee of a defender. I forgot exactly which defender, but by the knee of a corner. It turns out that he broke 2 ribs and punctured a lung. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. That's bad news for this team. Not like anything could get any worse for this team. This team still hasn't been able to score. Before tonight, wasn't able to score more than 24 points, which was really shocking. But they broke that mark yesterday. But something's got to happen, and I don't know if they're going to get rid of Trestman. The McCaskies are pretty cheap. They might keep him for an extra year, not try to eat 2 years. But something's got to happen, whether with him, whether with Jay Cutler. The defense is bad. It's awful, and I can't even believe that Chicago didn't even show up to try to, even if they were going to lose to Dallas, they could have at least looked better in the loss. I know they put up some points late, but Andrew, you saw that game, I saw that game. That thing was a blowout pretty much, and that final score was not indicative of how uncompetitive it was.
Yeah, they scored all those points towards the end. It was 35-4, or actually it was 38-14 before the Bears, it went as high as 38-14. It was 35-7. But I don't know, a lot of Jay Cutler stats came in garbage time. Like those 2 touchdowns basically came in garbage time, I would say. And, personally, I'm on the bandwagon with you guys. I don't believe in the Cowboys, especially their defense, which is currently ranked 23rd in the NFL in terms of total yardage. They're giving up 365 yards total. And they looked good in the beginning because the rushing game was very effective, but last week against the Eagles, it didn't look very effective, and they were home. You guys alluded to the schedule. Philly next week, which is going to be a primetime game, and then they play Indianapolis the week after. And I think that defense will really get exposed by the better offenses like Philly and Indianapolis, who have quarterbacks that can really expose that defense. On the flip side for Chicago, are they the most disappointing team? And also, going back to you, Adam, what's the sense around Chicago? Is either, you just said that Trestman you don't expect to be fired per se because you don't expect them to eat the last 2 years of his contract and buy him out. But do you see Cutler and or Trestman or both being gone next season at all? Is there a sentiment among in the media that says, hey, we need to get rid of both of these guys and just start new?
Well, to answer the latter part of your question, I think the media would love for Cutler and Trestman to be gone. I think they'd like for it all to be blown up and for this team to just, essentially just go away and come back next year better and looking more competitive. But obviously money's going to dictate and contracts are going to dictate. You're not going to get rid of Jay Cutler before you get rid of Trestman, even though I don't think they're going to get rid of Trestman. I think they're going to bring back the same staff on offense. Maybe they'll get rid of the coordinators as the sacrificial lambs.
Yeah.
the guys they'll get rid of to pretend like they're doing something. But things have to be shaken up there, and it's definitely Cutler. But Cutler's not going to go anywhere because he's getting paid a lot of money. He's a quarterback. They're hard to get. The fact that he can make you at least 8-8 is kind of all you can ask for in this league when you see teams like Tampa and Jacksonville struggling with quarterbacks and struggling to get more than 4 wins. But it's just a mess right there in Chicago, and they might be one of the most disappointing teams easily. I mean, didn't we all kind of think that they were going to really compete with Green Bay in that NFC North? And instead, if they lose in Minnesota, and Minnesota, who's been a frisky team, Minnesota, despite being 5-7, has played hard. They've played tough, and Minnesota has looked like a better team despite having around the same record as Chicago. Chicago might be the worst team in this division. That was something we didn't expect heading into the year at all.
Yeah, I know. I expected them to make a lot more noise than they did this season. And right now, maybe you can answer this, Adam. Do you think the offense has kind of reached its ceiling with the personnel they have? Is there anything that they could change? Obviously, defense needs an overhaul, but I'm wondering, Cutler-led offense, I mean, what else could they do?
Well, their big problems are they turn the ball over a lot, and Cutler's at the head of a lot of those turnovers. He's had a lot of fumbles lost. He's thrown a lot of picks. So it comes with it starts with him cleaning himself up, and they barely utilize Matt Forte, and Matt Forte is easily their best player on offense, their most consistent player, and I'm shocked that they don't utilize him as much as they do. And I just think maybe teams have figured out that Trestman offense because, like I said, before that Cowboys game, I don't think they had. I don't think they had scored. I might be wrong here, but I think it's only twice that they've scored 28 or more points. Like they barely even hit 24. So I think that maybe people are figuring them out, and the fact that Cutler turns the ball over and they barely utilize Forte, those would, to me, be signaling why this offense hasn't been so good this year.
Yeah, they've only scored 28 once, and they've
Right.
been close one other time when they beat the Falcons 27-13. Every other time it's been, so basically from the beginning of the season it's 20, 28, 27, 17, 24, 27, 14, 23, 14, 21, 21, 17, and then the 28 against the Cowboys. So it was kind of just, it's just very funny because Chicago is known to be the monsters of the Midway. You had Mike Singletary, Mike Ditka was on offense, but you had Mike Singletary there in the middle, and they were just a great defense. And now they kind of brought in an offensive coach, lost some of that defensive mentality, especially after losing Brian Urlacher last season, but they still had Lance Briggs. And now they're all offense, but their offense can't even score more than 28 points. And they got 2 beasts on the outside in Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall. You got one of the best all-around backs in the league, Matt Forte, and then Martellus Bennett's a stud at tight end. And Jay Cutler is a very capable quarterback, and their offensive line's improved. Last year they looked great on offense, and all of a sudden it kind of just seems like everything imploded this season. And I don't know how that really happens unless it's something from the coaching staff or Jay Cutler is just imploding all of a sudden.
I think it's Jay Cutler. I've always maintained it's Jay Cutler. The coach is going to take the blame before he does, but I've always thought that Jay Cutler is the guy who kills them. When you watch him play, he has no passion, he has no fire. Not only does he have no passion and no fire, but he'll make some dumb throws that you think to yourself, like, why is he making these types of throws? 8, 9 years into the league? Like, what is he thinking? I've always maintained that I think Cutler is a big reason why this thing isn't working.
Yeah, go.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, but they're basically stuck with him. So are they just planning on, continuing to essentially suck the next few years? Because
I guess so. Yeah, they're probably going to be content with 7-9 and 8-8. Look, the McCaskies who run that Bears team, like they like to win, but they don't like to win as much as they like to save money and make a buck. So that ownership is notoriously cheap. They're not going to do anything to rock the boat. If Jay Cutler provides some sort of interest like this, where we talk about them, even if it's in a crash and burn way, they can bring eyeballs to a podcast, to the TV screen, make a profit, and not have to eat money, and have a guy in Jay who can at least get them to 8-8. I think they'll take it, even though the fans are gonna be mighty upset when they see Detroit improving. When they see the Vikings, who are going to be a very good team in a few years, the way things are going there. Mike Zimmer's the right guy there. That's a good defense. Eventually it's going to come to an end, but I think for now the McCaskies aren't going to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, my thought, at least, was that they...
Did we lose Andrew?
I think we might have lost him.
Yeah, it
looks like we indeed lost the host of our podcast here. I figure he'll come back on at some point soon, and
maybe like how the conversation was going.
Yeah, maybe not. He's like, I can't.
Positive Bears, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, you're back.
Did I freeze, or did you guys freeze? Because I got you guys freezing.
No, you froze.
We all had you freezing.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Well, I just talked to myself for...
That's funny.
Talking about, huh?
So, yeah. Well, but we all do maintain that the Cowboys, though, we know that the Bears are the disaster. We can probably take the knife out of their back, but we all also agree, maybe closing out this topic, that the Cowboys are a team that we need to kind of wait and see what happens with the Indy and Philly game before we start crowning them as revitalized, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
One of these next two games, or they need to split one of these next two games to convince any of us, I feel like.
Yeah. I think a split would convince me. Like, if they beat one and lose to the other, even if if they lose to one, like, pretty decently and beat the other semi-convincingly, then I'll say that the Cowboys are back.
Yeah. I don't know. So, to seeing, I froze again? Seriously?
No, we all froze.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
The
I don't know.
internet
We're going to Cleveland. We're going to the Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel, I guess, quarterback controversy. Last week against the Bills, Brian Hoyer did not play well. He was pulled for Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel comes back in, nearly breaks Twitter and the entire internet. When he does, he then leads the Browns on a touchdown drive, bringing it 20-10. And then on the next play, he's accountable for another touchdown drive, but unfortunately it was for the Bills, as he went to go back to
Yeah.
Did we lose him again?
I don't know. I'm just going to let you guys talk. I'll interject with
We're
the stuff.
experiencing some technical difficulties here.
Oh, my God.
Brian, so the Brian the Brian Hoyer
I don't
situation.
even know if I'm on. Just go. Just go. Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel.
The Brian Hoyer situation is an interesting situation because true that the Browns are 7-5, but they are also a pretty shaky 7-5. I mean, they faced one of the easiest first half schedules in the league, and I mean, he hasn't looked good in any of those games, even in their wins. You kind of feel like they're winning in spite of him. Johnny Manziel, we don't really know who he is. We have our reservations about him, but we haven't seen those reservations, pan out yet, or maybe be proven wrong. So, but it is weird that they're choosing this long in the season to go with him and then not go with him and then stick with Brian Hoyer, and it's a weird situation there. Kind of feels almost like they're afraid, like, oh well, if they pull Hoyer and the Browns lose, then they're gonna blame it on us pulling Hoyer. But if we go down with the ship with Hoyer, then they'll be like, oh well, you have to bring in Johnny Manziel because the Browns are really good, and then Hoyer made them collapse. Even though, I think that the Browns are kind of propped up. That record's a propped up record. But I don't know. I'm curious about your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Browns is that everyone's kind of saying that Johnny Manziel should start. Johnny Manziel should.
Well, our boy Andy here. Yeah, go Zach.
Oh, God damn
it. I'll just make a quick point of I freeze, and you can take over.
We'll just take.
I think you nailed it, Adam. I think the Browns they're kind of in a catch-22. They play Manziel, and then he does awful, and then they're like, oh, man, you should have stuck with Hoyer. We had a chance for the playoffs. They stick with Hoyer, and they lose, like, why aren't we playing our first-round pick? So they're kind of completely stuck. My personal opinion is Hoyer's awful. I think he started saying before the week he's like 7-5 is no accident. Well, first of all, 7-5 is not even that great. You're not 10-2, so let's not take it for something it's not. And I think, like you said, they're 7-5 despite him. A lot of those wins were very low scoring. He made some awful throws, a couple late interceptions, and they still ended up winning. I think in their mind they have a chance. I guess they do technically have a chance for the playoffs, and they think he's the best way to get him there. I think they should have switched over to Manziel earlier in the year, and I think it would have been easier. He would have had more reps, more first-team reps. He gets more used to the offense. But at this point, 12 games in, 4 games to go, just stick with Hoyer. He's gone next year. He's a free agent. I don't think there's any way he's coming back. They kind of are, their hands forced to go to Manziel. They drafted him in the first round. The tickets are sold because of him. So at this point, I think they're making the right decision to stick with Hoyer. However, earlier in the year, I probably would have flipped over to Manziel and not waited till week 13 to start having all this controversy come up.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're almost stuck in a no man's land right now where, like you said, Zach, they're 7-5. Technically, they're in playoff contention, and you have to go with the guy who you think is going to help you win. Apparently, they think that's Hoyer, even though he hasn't convinced me. What I'm wondering, though, is if that's kind of an indictment on where they think Johnny Manziel is at right now, and they're not ready to throw him into the fire because they see some things behind the scenes that they're worried about. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
That's a good point. I mean, obviously, they're watching Manziel too. Maybe they think that Manziel isn't. I've thought that kind of same thing that you were alluding to, Mike, which is like, okay, well, if they really like Manziel so much, why haven't they already played him? And maybe you're right. Maybe they don't think he's as good as he might think he is.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to make it quick. I think this is an unlike Browns decision. I actually support what they're doing because they aren't succumbing to the media hype, and they just say, okay, Johnny Manziel's going to sit the bench. He's going to sit for the year. They're going to pull Carson Palmer with what happened with the Bengals when they were terrible and going through their problems. So if they're going to keep Johnny Manziel on the bench, good. Keep him on the bench. Go for the playoffs. Let Brian Hoyer fail or succeed, and then that way you have an easier decision for next year, and then you give Johnny Manziel a whole nother offseason to get better. I think it's actually an unlike Brown moves, because usually they would just say, okay, Johnny Manziel, go in there and fail. What's that going to do? That's not going to help anybody. Then he's going to take all this media criticism because everyone loves Johnny Manziel. So why not start Brian Hoyer, see what they really have, okay? Because he played decently throughout the year, until the last 4 games when he had 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions total. And even if Brian Hoyer starts, you can put Johnny Manziel in and provide a changeup, and the opponent isn't prepared for Johnny Manziel. Plus, there's not a lot of tape on him, so he could actually be a spark plug off the bench.
He could be. That's an interesting move. I mean, they maybe they could do that towards the end of the year, but
Right.
I don't know. Maybe the Browns are just as surprised as we are that they're 7-5, because who would have expected that? But you know, but like I mentioned, they're 7-5 playing an easy schedule. But
Right.
I mean, I think kind of, you know, they could maybe afford to gamble because, in all honesty, it's going to be hard to make the playoffs in the AFC, and any gamble that's towards a positive might push them towards their first playoff berth since 2002. So why not?
Yeah, the Derek Anderson, Braylon Edwards era.
Yeah.
That lasted 2 years.
I personally think with Manziel though, maybe throughout the year you get some packages for him, and you have him worked into the offense a little bit. So practice with the first team, and like you said, like yeah, they made the quarterback change last week, and they might do it this week too, because they might probably going to get killed versus the Colts. But why not have something worked into your offense a little bit? I saw, you know, a few years back when it was still the Alex Smith Kaepernick situation. This was back when everyone liked Harbaugh. They would bring Kaepernick into the game, and they'd have certain plays just for him that fit his, you know, that fit him, that fit his legs. They had him roll out. They had the read option. They had a couple of those plays, and the defenses weren't prepared, and they almost always work. So I know it's a tricky situation, and it's not college, and it's a little bit more difficult to do that in the pros. But I don't see any reason why they couldn't have, throughout the year, put in some packages just for Manziel, as opposed to, like, you know, that one trick play where he's like fake talking to the coach. But like the real packages for him, and let him try to work the offense and see what he can do.
Well, the thing about that is you don't want to disrupt the flow of the offense and take out Hoyer, because remember last year when, or even I guess with the Eagles, they had Vic and Foles going back and forth, and they would take out Vic for like one play. And then, you know, or last year with the Jets, or well, I guess now this year, they would take out Vic. They would take out Geno for one play. It's like, how is a quarterback supposed to get into the flow of a game with one play? And if he comes in for a certain package, everyone's like, oh, okay, this is going to be some type of run. So you're kind of keying off the defense, and it doesn't really make sense to just throw a quarterback out there for one play and then just keep him on the sideline for the rest of the game and have him keep coming back on and forth, like coming on and off the field, because you get no offensive rhythm, and plus your starting quarterback who's going to play the other 99% of the snaps isn't getting in a flow, and then your whole entire game plan is just messed up. So, like, right. I mean, it's good in theory. I get what you're saying, but, like, at the end of the day, I don't think it's a good move just to throw him out there to try to outsmart yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I also think, you know, I'm not talking just one play. I'm talking like a series of plays, right. Or maybe like you get in, you know, inside the 20 into the red zone, and that's where he can, you know, really excel or something like that. And I don't know what their whole thought process is, but I mean, you know, and I absolutely just don't know their practice situation and how many first-team reps he's getting. But I mean, he's the quarterback of the future, and you know, I think, you know, they are 7-5 this year, and however they got there, It's good for them, but they're not making the playoffs this year, so I think you got to get the guy involved a little bit.
You frozen again?
I think he froze. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Frozen. I'm frozen.
I was just gonna say, I think at a certain point you have to pick your guy and go with him. I mean, if Manziel is your quarterback of the future, you need to let everybody else on the team know that you're committed to him. So I'm not saying necessarily that you go with him for this coming week, but I think when you do go with him, you stick with him and you don't go back and forth.
Yeah. Eventually, what it's gonna do is it's gonna take away the confidence from one of those guys, and you can't really afford to have that going down the stretch of as I mentioned, trying to get into your first playoff season since 2002. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see if Brian Hoyer takes his almost benching as a spark plug to play better, because they're going to need it because they have a very hard schedule coming up. All their hard games got saved for the end, I guess, with them. And or if he crashes and burns, we'll see if they put in Manziel. But I think you guys made good points on it. You're going to need to give Manziel reps at some point, so maybe they do figure out a way to get him onto the field, at least in certain packages, just to give him some football reps.
Yeah. So we've talked about essentially every single quarterback in the league, and by every single one, I say Chicago and Cleveland. So now let's go a little more closer to the East Coast and the nation's capital with Washington. Because also this week, RG3 has stirred up controversy. It was actually yesterday. This was reported on various outlets that said Jay Gruden is not a fan of RG3 on and off the field. We kind of know that he's not really a fan of him on the field because of a couple weeks ago when RG3 kind of called out his teammates somewhat. Then the next day, Jay Gruden, said that RG3 needs to mind his own business. And then the next day came back and apologized for calling out RG3 in front of everybody, which made it seem like the owner, Dan Snyder there in Washington, kind of said something to Jay Gruden, and then Jay Gruden was kind of forced to apologize. But the new news here is that Jay Gruden feels that RG3 is more concerned about his brand than he is about playing football. That's not very good for a team that just sent 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick 2 years ago for Robert Griffin III. If that's going to happen, who do you think the Redskins are going to pick? Are they going to keep RG3? Are they going to keep Jay Gruden? Or are they going to keep both, or are they going to get rid of both guys? Because personally, how do you keep, I would maybe keep RG3 around for one more year just because he really hasn't played much the last couple years because of injuries, and that he's only had 1 year. They just got a new offense. So, if you really want to see what he's worth and you actually want to trade him eventually, I think you could use him, put him on another offseason under Jay Gruden, get his mind right, maybe boost his trade value, and send him packing by the trade deadline. I know not a lot of big deals happen at the trade deadline, but maybe that's what they're thinking, or they get rid of Jay Gruden and get somebody in there who would be, I guess, a better fit with RG3, making him more mobile, like moving him outside of the pocket, doing more zone reads and stuff like that. But that's, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, look, you put in so many resources to get RG3. You got to at least keep him, for nothing else, another year, see what you got with him. But, and like you said, he's been absent a lot, so he hasn't had as much wear and tear on his body, even though he's been out because of injury. But he's not, re-ripping muscles and doing things to further push his physical peak, farther and farther away from where it could be. So, I think you could keep him for one more year and see what you got with him. Maybe you keep everything going there. Maybe you actually have him work with the coaching staff in the off season and see if they can correct it. But obviously, if he's still remedial, next year and he continues to decline, then maybe you do have to get rid of him. I think having him as trade bait, that almost never works in the NFL. It really depends on if they want to eat that money that he'd be entitled to if he stayed on the roster. But I would stick with him for one more year and see what you got with him, because you're already this far. It's not like pushing the reset button is going to guarantee you a great quarterback next time. It's not like you have anybody great behind him. I mean, Kirk Cousins isn't good, and Colt McCoy is Colt McCoy. He's a small, limited, career backup.
Yeah.
And before you go, Mike, real quick, just looking at his contract situation, is that his cap hit next year would be $6.7 million. And he only accounts 3.2 against the base plus a $3.4 million signing bonus. So it's not like they're exactly doing much for him. Sorry about that. Doing much in terms of, getting hit by a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, and I was on the side that there's no way that the Redskins let RG3 go after they've invested so much in him. I think at this point, I don't see them continuing with him. I think he's already got soured 2 coaches, and he needs to just get a change of scenery, and the best thing for the team to do at this point is cut their losses, in my opinion, take what they can. But I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Adam.
Well, I mean, you heard, I believe personally maybe cutting their losses is a bit rash this early in. It's only the 3rd year. And, they've been 3 injury-plagued years. I know he's looked really bad in his 3rd year, but, 3 years in, and I don't know. It would be a lot. It would be a big waste to reset the deck so quickly. I mean, I'm not saying that I have hope for it if they were to reset the deck and if things were to go right, or if they were to reset the deck quickly. I'm not saying that I think things would go wrong or things would go right. I don't know what would happen, but I think it would be just a bit hasty only because, it's too soon. You have to at least see. You already got a guy that you think can be a guy. Remember, he had a great rookie year. But let's not forget that. So maybe he could eventually get back to that, get back to being what he was that rookie year. But you're never going to know unless you try him out, and it might be worth. And it might be worth that year of at least seeing what you have, and even if it's the same thing that you have, and you got to reset the deck, at least you knew, rather than it being too hasty and maybe RG3 goes elsewhere and Jake Green goes elsewhere, and it turns out to be a big mistake.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder if a quarterback-starved team like the Jets maybe would be willing to look at that impressive rookie season and focus on that and give a little bit more than maybe most of us suspect the Redskins could get for RG3 right now.
Zach is back.
Yeah, RG3.
You talk RG3 with us.
Okay. RG3 is going through all sorts of issues right now. What are we saying, that RG3 is not going to be back next year?
Well, we're debating whether or not he should be. I mean, because they gave up so much for him. Like, would you keep him around another year or try to play him the last couple games to boost some trade bait? I mean, you're playing from basically a position of you're not going to fool anyone in the NFL because they all know you're trying to get rid of him, so they're not going to give more than maybe a 3rd-round pick at the highest. And you gave up 3 first-round picks and a 2nd-rounder for this guy, figuring he was going to be a franchise player.
Yeah, I mean, even 3rd-round pick would be generous for him at this point. I mean, the things I'm reading, obviously I'm not inside their locker room, but the things I'm reading, it seems like he has to go. I mean, him or Gruden has to go because he just seems like a cancer inside that locker room, and it sounds like ownership's not liking him. The players aren't getting along with them. So, I mean, it doesn't really sound like they're going to play him much either. The problem that I see with the Redskins is they don't have a fallback. They thought Cousins was the fallback guy, and that obviously didn't work out. Colt McCoy is certainly not the fallback guy to be your starting quarterback next year, and it's going to be hard to convince all the Redskins fans out there that, we're going to go into the season with Colt McCoy and think we're going to win a Super Bowl. But
that's exactly what I was saying, Zach, and that's why I was saying, maybe you keep him another year just because you know what you have with him.
Right, and I got no problem keeping him, but unless the situation inside the locker room is that bad that they have to get rid of him, then I don't think they really have a choice. I don't know the guy's health either because it has just been a downward fall since that playoff game where he tear his ACL. It's been straight downhill since then. So I'm not sure the guy's completely healthy or maybe just hasn't progressed. I'm not exactly sure what the deal is, but they're in a really, really tough situation, and I think they're going to end up trading him. I'm not sure necessarily that's what I would do, but I think that's what they will do. I think they're going to trade him, and Andrew said a third-round pick. I think that'd be great if they could get that, but I'm thinking fourth or fifth even.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just a crazy situation in all three of these cities, Cleveland, Washington, and Chicago. It'll be very interesting to see what happens because the quarterback market is pretty, well, terrible. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember seeing the graphic on Monday Night Football, but they showed the available free agents. Ironically, they showed it on a Jets-Dolphin game, and Mark Sanchez was an available free agent, which was funny. And then they also had Matt Flynn, who has made more money sitting on his butt, like one of us, than he has actually throwing a football and contributing to a team. So I don't know what any of those things can do. But let's go to these games because there's an interesting slate of games this weekend. You have Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, Baltimore at Miami, Indianapolis. It is. Okay, Baltimore, Miami, Indianapolis at Cleveland, Buffalo at Denver, Seattle at Philly, KC at Arizona, New England at San Diego. But first, let's look at two interdivisional games between the Bucks and the Lions and the Packers and the Falcons. The Packers and Falcons will be on Monday Night Football because Adam and Mike both have the NFC North and the NFC South, respectively. So, guys, give us some perspective on these games. I guess go with the worst game, the Bucks versus the Lions. Or actually, both games, because in terms of the Packers and Lions, Adam, they have huge playoff implications. It's not like we're expecting a huge upset, but both these teams really need to win to keep pace with each other in the division.
Yeah, the Lions have a really easy schedule down the stretch. They have they're hosting Tampa Bay, then they host the Minnesota Vikings, who are a frisky team, but that's about it. I mean the Lions will still be able to dispatch them, even though Minnesota's tougher than their 5-7 record indicates. Then they're at Chicago. Then it sets up for being at Lambeau Field with a Green Bay team who's currently a game ahead of them, and whose schedule is also not the toughest either. I'd say that Green Bay's toughest game, they host Atlanta on Monday night, then they're at Buffalo, then they're at Tampa Bay, and then they host the Lions in that Lambeau showdown. So, both those teams really have a good month or so ahead of them before they have to play each other, where if they win out, then it could be for the winner of the NFC North on December 28th, which should be a lot of fun. The Lions beat them the first time around in Detroit. I think Detroit's going to win this game against Tampa Bay. I think even if they're able to just score 24 points, the Buccaneers have turned the ball over a lot and have a hard time scoring. Obviously, I'm going to throw to Mike pretty soon. He can kind of allude on that, but I think that the Lions defensively, if they can at least get up to 24, they'd be able to hold the Bucs down. Is that kind of accurate, Mike, with the Bucs offense?
I think if Detroit scores more than about 13 points, the Bucs are in trouble. But I will say, I think there's potential for it to be a little bit closer than people expect. I think the spread was like 10-ish points last time I checked.
Yeah, that's a little much because the Lions aren't a good scoring offense, so I wouldn't trust them to cover a 10-point spread.
And despite the opposite success this season, I'd say both those teams kind of are built similarly. Since their bye week, the Bucs have had one of the most improved defenses in the league.
Right.
And obviously Detroit has that great defense. And you have, I guess, Mike Evans is kind of Calvin Johnson light for the Buccaneers. The big difference is the offensive line and Josh McCown, and that's quite a big difference, and I think that's where you start to doubt the Bucks' chances of keeping it close if Detroit starts putting up a lot of points.
That's why that's why I kind of had the lines in this, because I agree. I think the Bucks actually, despite being 2-10, they've had a lot of close losses. Like, everyone remembers them from that blowout in Week 3 against Atlanta, but beyond that, and they had that one bad game against the Ravens where Flacco threw for 6 or 7 touchdowns. But beyond that, Tampa Bay's they've kind of been in a lot of their games more so than they've been getting blown out, and they've been much more competitive than people might think just based off of those 2 games and looking at the record. The Tampa team defensively is a lot better than the stats indicate, but they have trouble scoring and they turn the ball over a lot, which is the only reason I trust Detroit more in this.
Yeah, I think if you're a Bucks fan, though, there's a lot of things you've seen in recent weeks that'll give you reason to be optimistic about the future. And, that defense, it's going to be a strong defense come next season, and they just need the offense to complement it.
As for Packers-Falcons, look, Green Bay just needs to keep it rolling. Not just to, keep pace above Detroit, which is, of course, important, but also just to keep pace above Philly and with, Arizona, who's fading, and above the surging Seattle Seahawks to try to remain among the top 2 seeds in the crowded, NFC playoff picture, especially towards the top. And I think they can get it done with the Falcons. The Falcons aren't a very good defense. The Packers are coming off an emotional win against the Patriots for a win where their defense came up pretty large when it was asked to, forced 4 punts, got a big stack of Brady late, and I think they're going to come out energized. And the Falcons could still win that NFC South, but Mike, this Falcons team. Outside of that win against Arizona, they haven't beaten anyone outside the NFC South. They haven't been very good. They've just been fortunate enough to play in a bad division and be the best bad team in that division. So, I mean, do you think that I'm right here? You think the Packers? Because I think the Packers win and win easily. What are your thoughts on that?
I would almost say the Bucks have a better chance of beating Detroit than the Falcons do of beating the Packers, to be honest. You have the league's worst defense. Statistically, they're giving up the most yards out of any other team versus Aaron Rodgers and one of the league's best offenses in Green Bay in cold weather. It just doesn't add up to a very positive outlook. I think Matt Ryan could probably keep it respectable if the offensive line blocks for him. But unless there's a dramatic defensive improvement, they do have William Moore back, but I don't know if that's enough. Not feeling too great about their chances to hold on to that NFC South lead this week.
Adam, do you think anybody can beat the Packers in the NFC, especially if they get home field throughout? Like, obviously, if they had to go to Seattle, that could be tough. But if Seattle has to come to them or if Philadelphia has to come to them, do you think anybody can beat them in the NFC?
Before that Patriots game, I thought that physical teams would be able to beat them. I thought that Seattle-type teams, San Francisco-type teams, physical defenses would be able to beat them. That they are kind of what they've shown in the last few years, which is they look really, really nice when they're beating up on Minnesota. And even though I said Minnesota was frisky, they look nice when they beat up on Minnesota and Chicago and stuff. But what happens when they get to the playoffs? But that Patriots game kind of convinced me otherwise. That defense made stops or needed to make stops against a Patriots team that was the highest scoring in the league coming in. The way that they dismantled Philadelphia, not just the Packers offense dismantling that Philly defense, but the way that Green Bay defense really held that Philly offense down. I actually have been more impressed with the Packers, and the Packers actually went from a team that I thought was just kind of this regular season juggernaut racking up some questionable wins to a legitimate team that maybe won't be able to be stopped in the NFC.
Mike, I have a quick question about the Bucks. I mean, they have a lot of young talent on offense. They have Vincent. I know Vincent Jackson's not young per se, but he is pretty darn good when he has a capable quarterback.
I think he was.
You froze on the question there.
Vincent, yeah. I think he was going to say something about how Vincent Jackson has looked
Doug Martin's future.
Yeah.
We're getting word that he was asking
Doug
Martin's future. All right, well, I'll just pick up on that. I think you look at who they have on the outside. Mike Evans is definitely going to be an offensive star going forward. Vincent Jackson, there's a chance they might not keep him next season, just depending on if they want to save some money and go with a youth movement. In terms of the running game, I think Doug Martin's probably gone after this season. I think they like Charles Sims, the rookie that they drafted this year. But it really comes down to their offensive line. They're not going to be able to get any running game going as long as that offensive line isn't clicking, and that's something they're really going to need to address going forward.
Well, we're going to, and we lost some connection with Andrew, so we're just going to go on to the other breakdown of the games, just me, Zachary Benau, and Michael Green. Zach, in your division, Colts, Browns. The Colts have the Browns. They have. I know they have Dallas in Week 16. Who do they have in Week 15? I'm forgetting.
So they have obviously the Browns this week, and then they have the Cowboys. Or they have the Texans, Cowboys, and then Titans to finish.
Texans, Cowboys, and then Titans to finish.
Right. So this game is really crucial for them. Division game against the Texans, I think they should be fine, but you never know. The Cowboys and Dallas will be very interesting. And Titans, they should win. So, I mean, they're good for at least 2 wins, but I think they're going to win against the Browns. Obviously, we talked about the Browns a little bit. They're in their whole quarterback flux situation. Just got word that Vontae Davis is, in fact, playing today, which is going to be a huge help because he can basically guard Josh Gordon one-on-one. So the way the Colts offense puts up points, even though their defense has been a little suspect of late, I just don't see any way they could lose this game, even in Cleveland, because worst case scenario, I think the Colts, put up 24 points, and that would be like a bad game for Andrew Luck, and I just don't see the Browns be able to score that many points. And I honestly think the Colts are going to put up more than that, at least 28, maybe 31, 35. Andrew Luck is just kind of on a whole nother level. He throws for, he's already thrown for 300 yards 10 out of the 12 games, which is a record. Peyton Manning never even did that in Indianapolis. So the guy's absolutely incredible. They got their cornerback. They're getting healthy. Fleener's playing really well. So I think the Colts should be good. I think the Colts, obviously, they're going to win the division, which they could actually win this week with the Texans' loss. What seed they'll get, that's still kind of up in the air, and that's why they want to win as many as possible. I don't know if they can get that bye, which is going to be really what they should strive for, getting that 2 seed or 1 seed, but we'll see. As far as my other games in the division, nothing really.
I was going to say Giants, Titans, I think is.
We can skip that.
Skip that. The Giants are either going to blow it like they did against Jacksonville, and Tennessee's going to get a maybe not that impressive 3 wins because the Giants have been awful, or the Titans are going to, be what the Titans are, which is bad. But I was interested in an intra-divisional game within your division, Houston at Jacksonville. Not for the Jacksonville angle, which, by the way, that was a pretty nice win against the Giants.
That was good.
Surprising win, but a good win. But if Houston wins that game, which I think they should, because they've been at least average or on par, pretty good, and they're better than Jacksonville. That sets them up pretty interestingly when they have to face the Colts next week. And you were alluding to Colts and Houston. Houston started to get blown out in that Thursday night game and then made it interesting late. Do you think that Houston could actually maybe second time around? I know they have bad luck in Indy, and Indy's a place where they're pretty much cursed as a franchise. But do you think they can keep that close? Do you think Houston can make it interesting and maybe make this AFC South race more interesting than we thought it could be?
I think they can keep it close, and I think just having it's amazing that J.J. Watt literally wreaks havoc by himself on that defense. He is you rarely see like a straight game changer in football on defense, and he is that because he just puts so much pressure on the quarterback. So if he can continue to get to Luck in that game and continue, Luck and the Colts have had a couple turnover issues. They had turnover issues against some bad teams too, the Titans and Jaguars. They were turning the ball over a bunch. So if Watt could get to him and they could force a couple turnovers, I do think they can keep that game close. But once again, I think Indy's offense is just too strong, and I'm not sure the Texans have enough on their offense despite Indy's struggles. You really don't know what you're going to get. I mean, now they're at Fitzpatrick. It's kind of been Fitzpatrick. Now it's out now. You don't know what you're going to get from Fitzpatrick. I mean, he did throw 6 touchdowns last week, which was incredible, but, I mean, I wouldn't bank on that every week. So I'm kind of just thinking the Colts are going to win this division. Texans, I think the Texans are an 8-8 team, which, considering what they finished last year, 2-14 and got the first pick, and they've got nothing out of their first pick since he's now on injured reserve. They haven't had a bad year, and I do think they can step up from this. They're going to have to figure out their quarterback situation, get a couple more pieces. But to answer your question, I think the Texans will keep it close in Indy for 2.5 quarters, and then the Colts would pull away.
Okay, well, the Texans will have to beat the Jaguars first this week, but
Exactly.
I think they can do that.
I mean, if the Texans don't beat the Jaguars, it's over for next week. If the Texans lose to the Jaguars, they'll have already lost the division, and they'll get killed by Indianapolis. They gotta do this league.
Right, exactly. Well, that's a good point. Quickly before we go to Andrew's division, the AFC East, because we covered Packers and we covered the Bears already played, and we covered Detroit, and the Vikings-Jets. I think it's just good for a laugh. I think the Vikings are better than the Jets, and we'll prove it on Sunday. But I wanted to just finish up in the NFC South with you, Mike, real quick. Saints-Panthers. The Panthers mathematically, believe it or not, are still in this divisional race. The Saints are obviously fighting hard with the Falcons, who they get again in the Dome in a few weeks. Will the Saints put the Panthers out of their misery and, keep putting the pressure on the Falcons this week?
I think so. I think this is the week where New Orleans finally rises to the top spot. Both teams combined for a grand total of 8 wins going into this matchup, but somehow this is going to have major playoff implications. I think you look at what the Panthers have done lately, they're not saying it out loud, but they're pretty much admitting that their season's over. They just released Antoine Cason, who was supposed to be their top cornerback going into the season. A few weeks back, they released Godfrey. They're going with a total youth movement right now on defense, and I think it's all about just kind of scouting it out for next season with them and hoping that Cam Newton could gain some form of confidence going forward. For the Saints, I think there's a lot of positives. I know we've said this before, but I'm optimistic that maybe they could add a little bit more quality to the NFC South. Patrick Robinson is playing a lot better, giving them a solid second cornerback on defense. And Drew Brees is coming off a 5-touchdown game shortly after rumors were circulating that the Saints were going to be looking for his replacement. So all in all, I think this is where the Saints finally make a move and don't look back in the NFC South.
I agree with you.
Confident do the Panthers feel in Cam Newton going forward? Like, is he injured? Because remember a couple weeks ago, everyone was kind of saying, I think it was on Monday Night Football when they played, I want to say Pittsburgh or somebody, everyone was kind of just like, hey, is Cam Newton okay? Like, is he really as good as we think? Can he really lead a team to the playoffs? Like, what's the deal with him? And then on the flip side for the Saints, how true were those rumors of the Saints thinking about drafting not a replacement per se, because they're not going to replace Drew Brees next year, but like an understudy, kind of like the Patriots have with Tom Brady and
Guess somebody interjected there.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my answer.
Axe. I think Adam's answer was an axe.
Yeah.
And
that might be appropriate. on that note, we'll talk about the Panthers, I guess, first. I think with Cam Newton, you have two camps. You either have the group who thinks that he's not the guy who they thought he was, and that, injuries, maybe lack of leadership are contributing to the Panthers' demise this season. You have another argument, which I tend to side with, that David Gettleman just did not give him enough to work with this season. He had to deal with a completely new group of receivers, completely revamped offensive line, which is not very good. And I would say that you need to at least give him some more tools next season, get somebody who could block for him, get him another receiver outside of Kelvin Benjamin, and see what he could do before you pull the plug. In terms of the Saints and Drew Brees, I think rumors of his decline are exaggerated. If you're on your way out, you don't go and throw 5 touchdowns with no interceptions against a most likely playoff-bound Pittsburgh team. He is 35, though. Eventually, it's inevitable that you are going to want to draft a successor. I don't think it's an emergency right now, but it will probably happen within the next 3 seasons, I would say.
Yeah, I just found it interesting because the Patriots did the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. People, no one's going to replace Tom Brady, but like you said, eventually there's going to be a decline in Brady's play, and they're going to need somebody to succeed Brady, or succeed Brady, I should say. Even though, that's going to be the position no one wants to do. You want to be the guy after the guy who replaced Brady, not the guy replacing Brady.
Yeah, talk about a shadow cast over you.
Yeah, it's like Derek Jeter.
Right, it's like Jeter or Elway or Marino. Dolphins quarterbacks are still trying to get out of that Dan Marino shadow, including Ryan Tannehill, who faces the Ravens this week, and pretty good game of 7-5 teams. I think the Dolphins, though, quietly, and you would know this, Andrew, I think the Dolphins are one of the best 7-5 teams in the league.
Yeah, they are really misleading because they've lost 2 or 3 really close games, and 2 of them have come into the NFC North division foes, Adam, where they lost last second to both the Packers on a Dan Marino-esque fake spike. That's good English. And Jesus, I'm having a banner day, guys. Frozen. The mom's coming in asking for keys. The dog has to go out. It's been a banner day. What can I say? Anyway, they lose to the Packers last second. They lose to the Lions last second as well on the last second pass to Theo Riddick from Matt Stafford. This team is a couple wins away from probably being a 2 seed, a 3 seed, depending on top, because they do have the tiebreaker over the Patriots, because they beat them at the beginning of the season. But Ryan Tannehill has played really well since being called out by Joe Philbin before their London game against the Raiders. He's played really well, and their defense is actually one of the best units in the league, if you think about it. Grimes is a stud at cornerback. They have Cortland Finnegan, who's feisty but may not play. He may play. It depends based on the injuries reports from yesterday and today. But they've gotten a boost from Jelani Jenkins at the linebacker position, who was a former Florida Gator guy. Didn't show much last year, but has really played well this year. And their defensive line is kind of the strength of the team. Olivier Vernon, Randy Starks, and of course Cameron Wake rushing the passer. But they really caught a break here because Baltimore is going to be without Haloti Ngata, who's a Pro Bowl defensive tackle, probably one of the best 3-4 nose tackles in the game. Could be argued maybe the best, but maybe him, maybe Vince Wilfork, a couple others. But they get a break there. I don't know if Baltimore's offense is per se explosive, but the biggest thing is that the Jets ran all over the Dolphins last week. And Baltimore does have a good running game with Justin Forsett. So I think if we're looking at key matchups there, that's a really big key matchup because It's going to be how well can the Dolphins tackle in the secondary, the second level, and also, kind of shut down that running game. And also that offense didn't look good against the Jets. Granted, the Jets' defense, their front seven is very good. Their secondary is very bad. Jarvis Landry has really stepped it up for the Dolphins. He's actually become a go-to receiver, surprisingly, as a rookie over Mike Wallace. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a really close game, but it is in Miami, so maybe it's a little bit of an advantage there. But I'm not going to pick a winner really because I think it's really just a 50-50 coin flip. But I would give a slight edge to the Dolphins because of their defense. I think it's a little bit better than the Ravens' defense, and Haloti Ngata's absence is really going to hurt Baltimore because they're going to put in Terrence Cody, who is really just a reserve defensive lineman.
Patriots and Chargers is a pretty good game. I'm interested in kind of all your guys' thoughts on this. What if San Diego beats New England in San Diego this Sunday night on NBC on national TV? Would you guys? We like San Diego early, then they've been kind of struggling lately. Some could argue that they've had a pretty tough schedule facing their division, which has three, teams above 500, or two other teams above 500 in Kansas City and Denver, and then a good NFC West division. If San Diego is able to beat New England here, it obviously changes up the playoff picture, but what does it make you think about San Diego? Will they all of a sudden be contenders to win the AFC West?
I thought they were starting the season. I picked them to go to the Super Bowl because I kind of bought onto the bandwagon, and they had an impressive victory over Seattle at home, and they beat Buffalo, who looks like a good team now. And the funny thing is, I was listening to Colin Cowherd coming home, and they pointed out that if they win, Trey Wingo of NFL Insiders, he pointed out that if they win against New England, they would have the tiebreaker over New England. And they would play Denver next, and it would be an interesting scenario not only for the number 1 seed, but also for the division, because they would split with Denver, and then they would kind of have, I don't know how the three-way tiebreaker works out, but they have the whole entire three-way tiebreaker with Denver and San Diego, and then whoever, if they finish with identical records, whoever, with New England, they would have the tiebreaker over New England.
Yeah, I think the Chargers are really good, and I've been high on them since the beginning of the year as well. I do think it's just going to be tough for them to win the AFC West. First of all, I don't have exact stat for this, but I do know the Patriots coming off a loss in the Belichick-Brady era, they're almost unbeatable.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure they ever really lose. But even if they can get by this game, then they got the Broncos next week at home, which obviously they're going to have to win if they want to win the division. And then they got the Niners to finish out their last two games. Are Niners on the road on a primetime game. I think it's a Saturday night game. And then the Chiefs on the road. And we all know Arrowhead's a super tough place to play, and it's a divisional game, and Chiefs could be fighting for their playoffs life at that stake. So they got a brutal little 4-game stretch here.
They do.
So I am high on the Chargers, and I think they'll get into the playoffs, and I would not want to face them in the playoffs. And I think Philip Rivers has been great this year. They might get some running backs, too, later in the season, but I just don't think they have enough with the schedule to be able to win this division. I think it just doesn't play in their favor, especially with the Patriots coming off a loss.
I think if the Chargers were to win out in this schedule, though, and get into the playoffs, they would be scary to face because they wouldn't have cupcakes if they were beating up on again in the playoffs. That would mean they would have to have either split or gone 3-1 against 4 very good teams, which would be very, very impressive.
Right. And I do think they're going to get into the playoffs. I just don't think they're going to win the AFC West.
Right. Okay.
Just because I don't think they can win out these 4 games.
Yeah, real quick. If they were to win out, I'd be a believer, but I've been reluctant to jump on Chargers bandwagon ever since the LaDainian Tomlinson era. Something about them and making a title run just doesn't sit well with me. But I agree. I think the Broncos are the class of the AFC West and the AFC in general right now. I do think at home San Diego has a good chance to go toe-to-toe with New England and pull out a win, but overall, I wouldn't pick them for a Super Bowl run necessarily.
And then on the other side of the ledger, Andrew, getting a little bit back into your division with the Patriots, the AFC East leading Patriots. How badly do the Patriots need this game against San Diego? Do they need this game badly? They play Miami one more time. Miami plays them pretty tough. I know that game's in New England. But does New England really need this game, or have they kind of proven all they need to, and you think even with a loss here, they'll be fine the rest of the way in terms of getting that number 1 seed and winning the AFC East?
I mean, out of all the AFC teams, personally, I feel like they're actually the favorites because I feel that they can go anywhere. Their defense is much improved, especially in the secondary. They're going to get Chandler Jones back, whether it's this week or next week, which should really help their pass rush. Their linebackers are a lot better. So I really feel that the Patriots would be fine going on the road, but if they have to go to Denver in the AFC Championship game, I think they will lose. So in terms of how big is this game for New England, I think this is a really big game for them. They almost beat the Packers last week, and they lost by 5, and the Packers kicked like 3 or 4 field goals, and Rob Gronkowski dropped a touchdown in the end zone, which probably would have beat them. But I think they need to be at home. They need to play in Foxborough. They have a huge advantage when they do because of the snow and the cold and the wind and just whatever magic voodoo that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have there. It works. And I really think they need a win. And just a quick note, Zach, you weren't sure what the record was. I just looked it up. Under Bill Belichick, the Patriots are 36-4 after a loss.
I knew it was good.
Yeah, definitely a little better than good. But
we got the Bills. We talked about the Broncos. The Bills are at the Broncos this weekend in a pretty good game. Bills 7-5. Really, I feel maybe you guys might feel like this. Andrew, you see that division a lot. You know that division well. The Bills, I feel like, are a Kyle Orton and an E.J. Manuel. That if they were purged of E.J. Manuel and Kyle Orton and had anyone decent, even Carson Palmer in there, but they could be, maybe contending with the Bills or with the Patriots because they've got a lot of talent on offense. Robert Woods is a good player. They've got really good backs. Sammy Watkins is pretty good. They've got a pretty good offensive line. The D-line might be the best in football and, the most underrated in football. Like, that's a Bills team that I feel like the quarterback play is the only reason that they're not as good. And the fact that they're even 7-5 speaks to you with how good the rest of the talent is. I'm not saying that the Bills will win in Denver because I don't think it's a possible task because I think that Peyton Manning can just outscore the Bills and that's going to be that. But what do you think about the Bills? More so kind of like the Bills' future. Like, do you think that that they know kind of what they have, which is a pretty good roster, especially a good D-line, and maybe they'll look to try to trade up and get a better quarterback? Because I think with a decent quarterback, they could make some noise. Them in Miami could actually legitimately challenge New England.
Yeah, I mean, so you hit on a lot of points. I'll hit on the game first. Honestly, the Bills won't win. There's just no way they can win. They're going to be able to generate pressure with that front four, which leads the NFL in sacks with 48 this season, and they've let it combine the last 2 seasons. They have 105 sacks. They had 58 last year. But there's just no way that their offense can keep pace with Peyton Manning and the Broncos. I'm sorry. Kyle Orton is not a good quarterback. He's solid enough to not make enough mistakes, but he's really not that much of an upgrade over E.J. Manuel. And I think that is exactly what is holding this team back. But the problem is the rest of the team is so good. Like when Kiko Alonso went down, they were expected to take a huge hit on defense. Same with Jairus Byrd going to the Saints. And that hasn't happened at all. They've actually been playing a lot better. Preston Brown, Nigel Bradham have both played exceptionally well in the linebacker corps. Aaron Williams has seamlessly stepped in for Jairus Byrd. And like you said, talent everywhere except quarterback is great. Quarterback position they need to upgrade somehow. They won't do it during free agency because there's just no one to really take, and they can't trade again because they already gave up their first-round pick to Cleveland when they traded up for Watkins. So maybe they hope that somebody falls down to them. Maybe, I mean, this is going to sound like crazy. What happens if Jameis Winston, all this off-the-field stuff, drops him all the way down the board somehow? And they're staring at a quarterback. They go, Jameis Winston, he has all this trouble, but we're not a big media market. We're in the middle of nowhere. He's not going to get in trouble or as much trouble. And we also have E.J. Manuel on board who could help maybe mentor him. And Jameis Winston gets drafted by the Bills. It's not a crazy possibility. I don't think they trust E.J. Manuel or Kyle Orton. There's just no way they can trust both of them as starters. Too many weapons. They're wasting too many guys' prime. And the last note on the future, I mean, eventually all those defensive linemen are going to have to get paid. Marcel Darius is coming up on his option, his rookie year option, I think next year. And he's played at an incredible level this season after a lot of off-the-field stuff. But Jerry Hughes, who looked left for dead in Indianapolis, gets traded over to Buffalo, has a resurgence. I don't know if they're going to pay him because I think he's going to command too much money from other teams as a pass rushing specialist.
Yeah, I think that Jameis Winston thing would be interesting because, they both him and EJ went to Florida State and they could help mentor each other. But that's obviously something that's, that's wishful thinking because it's likely not going to be that's what winds up happening.
That's about as likely to happen as me winning the lottery. So. Yeah.
Someone's going to take Winston, though, and it's going to be a big conversation. We don't know who it is, but someone's going to be like, oh, okay. And then it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes because someone's going to have to take the risk, whatever round it is. Someone's going to be staring at him and be like, man, he's got a lot of skills, even though he's an idiot.
Yeah, I think if he behaves himself, though, his stock only goes up and he ends up more in that top 10 range.
Yeah, probably. I just don't know how much of the off-the-field stuff really deters NFL teams, especially in this day and age with Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, yada, 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 whoever else is going to get arrested or charged with something. So I think that'll play a bigger role in the draft going forward.
It's funny because before we touch on the last three big games of the day, the Bills are the ultimate example of why the quarterback position is so important because the Bills literally, they're pretty much set almost everywhere else on the field, but because they don't have a quarterback situation, it's always shaky, and it's like there's a lot of teams in this league that all they really need is a quarterback and they can be contenders, but there's so few great quarterbacks, and then there's teams like Zach, like the Indy Colts, which without Andrew Luck would be a 2-3 win team easily, but because they have Andrew Luck, they know they're going to win 10 games. So.
Yeah, let's get off the Bills though because they're kind of depressing outside of their defense. And let's get to probably the three best games. The New England-San Diego game is probably the second best, but there are other interesting games on the schedule. We'll hit all of them at once. Kansas City visits Arizona. Drew Stanton not looking too good. Alex Smith also has forgotten that there are this thing called wide receivers that you throw to, and they sometimes catch the ball, so maybe you should throw it to them. And then you have Cincinnati-Pittsburgh, which is going to be huge for the AFC North. And then you got a very intriguing matchup. Seattle visits Philly. Seattle, not as good of a road team as everyone thinks. Philadelphia, high-powered offense. Seattle, high-powered defense. And also Mark Sanchez gets to go against a high-powered defense. So will we see the old Mark Sanchez, or should I say the Jets version of Mark Sanchez, or will we see this Chip Kelly Philadelphia Eagles Mark Sanchez?
I think the Eagles can put up points just because their offense, they get off so many plays. They get off so many plays so quickly that they can be able to put up points. McCoy's playing a lot better, too. And I also don't think you're going to need to score a ton of points this game. Seattle's defense is coming together a little bit, but like I said, Philadelphia and the way they run their offense, it's going to be impossible to stop them entirely. They're going to be able to score a little bit. So, and I think the way Seattle's offense, which is struggling, and really have no playmakers on the outside, so if you can shut down Marshawn Lynch, you're in pretty good shape. I think they'll be able to score. So I'm going to say Mark Sanchez will be great, but I think they'll be able to score enough to beat Seattle. And they're also pretty tough at home, Philadelphia. They got a nice little winning streak going there. So I think they'll be able to score, 20 points, 17, 20 points. I think that will be enough to hold them off.
I think if you're playing this game in Seattle, it's a completely different story. In Philadelphia, I do like the Eagles. I like Mark Sanchez to keep doing what he's doing, coming off a big win on Thanksgiving and having some extra time to prepare for Seattle is going to be huge. And like Zach said, they've finally got McCoy going. The offensive line's getting healthier. I actually think that it might not even be that close of a game, ultimately. I think the Eagles go in and take care of business.
I'm really intrigued in this game. There's so many, being a West Coast guy, well, three of us are West Coast guys, there's so many Pac-12 storylines in this. Mark Sanchez versus his old coach, Pete Carroll, who Pete Carroll didn't even want him to go to the NFL as early as Mark wound up going. Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll faced each other towards the end of Pete's run in that conference when Chip just got to Oregon. Nick Foles, a Pac-12 guy who his job is up in the air with Sanchez. So a lot of West Coast storylines with these two teams. I think that Philadelphia is a defensive line that people are talking very little about, but if you look at the advanced metrics, they're actually in the top 10 against the run and the pass. This Philly defense has actually been legitimately good. They were actually helping this team win games when the offense wasn't able to click yet. Now the offense is clicking. I think Seattle is good. I think they're back, but I think that on the road in this spot in Philadelphia, I think Philadelphia last year was a bit of flash and not a lot of substance. I think Philadelphia this year is actually a legitimately good team, and I think that they're going to beat Seattle. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think they're going to be able to beat Seattle. The only thing I would worry about is if Pete tells his corners how to kind of defend against Mark Sanchez, and organized chaos has been able to rattle Mark Sanchez. If Sanchez gets rattled, then this could be a blowout the other way, but I think Philly's going to win by 5 points or so.
Yeah, I think that'll be a close game. Real quickly, Cincinnati Pitt, Arizona KC. I mean, that Arizona KC looks like a good game on paper, but Arizona's offense is terrible. They get Larry Fitzgerald back, but Drew Stanton has regressed back to the mean, and honestly, he didn't really play that well in the beginning of the season. I mean, I watched him against the Giants, and the Giants could have beaten the Cardinals if Eli didn't throw like 2 interceptions or whatever he did. And if they had Odell Beckham Jr., who they didn't have that third game of the season. And then Cincinnati-Pittsburgh, I mean, this is just AFC North top spot. It'll be very interesting to see what type of Andy Dalton we get, because he's so hot and cold. It's amazing. And we're talking about the Bills. They have so much talent around them, and their team is set up. But I feel like the Bengals were the Bills before the Bills were, if that made any sense. Because Andy Dalton is like, when he's good, that Bengals team is very good. But when he's bad, they do not play well. And that may be the simplest statement I've ever made in my life. Like, this isn't breaking news or a hot take, but it really is true, because he just is so up and down that he's wasting the talent around him. I mean, if you look at that roster, it's a very good roster that they have there, and the same thing goes for the Bills.
Yeah, I agree with you on that Cincinnati point. I think Cincinnati wins kind of in spite of Andy Dalton. I think, I'll give my quick takes on these games. Cincinnati-Pittsburgh's interesting. I'm worried about Pittsburgh. They play way too up and down the competition. I mean, there's no reason that they had to struggle against Tennessee a few weeks ago on the road. They lost to the Jets. They lost to Tampa Bay. They struggled with Jacksonville. they're way too hot and cold and way too inconsistent for my liking. That pass defense is terrible. I think Dick LeBeau has seen the NFL pass him by, and I think Cincinnati, I don't like Andy Dalton, but I like the talent on that team, and I think they're the best team in a division that's a little questionable, even though everyone's got a good record. So I think Cincinnati is going to beat Pittsburgh and stay ahead in that division. KC, Arizona, both these teams are starting to fade a little bit. KC's a tough place to play, but the Alex Smith cannot throw the ball downfield. Arizona already asks a lot of its corners. Their corners are going to have an easy job against an Alex Smith who's not going to challenge him deep, and I think this plays in Arizona's favor, and I'm going to take Arizona close because Drew Stanton is not a good offensive player, and Kansas City's defense is pretty good, even though they got shellacked by Denver last week. But I still think Arizona is going to win this game close, and those are my takes on those games.
Cool. Real quickly, I think both games are going to be close. I like the Bengals slightly over Pittsburgh, although I'm not thrilled about picking either team to win at this point right now. But I think they keep the ball out of Andy Dalton's hands just enough to win the game. Arizona, Kansas City. I worry if Arizona doesn't have Andre Ellington, which it looks like they might not. What they could do on offense. Their defense, though, I think will be solid enough to pull out a win against Alex Smith, who still refuses to throw to receivers in the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on both these real quickly. Everything's been said. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, that's a game that, like, you see one of those teams play. Sometimes you'll see Pittsburgh play, and you're like, wow, they're Super Bowl contenders. And then you watch them play next week, and then they aren't going to make the playoffs. And it's the exact same thing with Cincinnati. You see them play, oh, they look like they could win the Super Bowl, and then you watch them play the next week, and it looks like they have no chance. So this is totally like a throw-up-in-the-air game. It's two teams that I just don't trust the way they've been playing. I'd probably go Cincinnati by a little bit just because, Dalton not under the lights is always a little bit better. So I think they can pull it out. Should be close, though, but I would go Cincinnati. And as far as the Cardinals game versus the Chiefs, this will be a great game if you don't like offense because these teams did not score. And the Cardinals, now with their backup and no Ellington, I don't know how they're going to put any points on the board. The Chiefs pretend like wide receivers aren't a real position. So, I mean, they got the over-under listed here at 39.5. I'd probably go under that. I mean, I think it could be one of those, like, 13-10 games. So I think it will be fun to watch the last couple minutes. I wouldn't recommend sitting through the whole thing for the afternoon slate when you have so many other good games. But I'd go Arizona at home, 13-10. But I think it's going to be really, really low scoring.
Before we wrap it up, does Kevin Huber, the punter who got injured last week, and I think he also got kicked in the face. Didn't he get kicked in the face last year by Antonio Brown on the kickoff, or this year? Either way, he got a new face mask. I think that's a really funny story because he's facing the Steelers, and he had a broken jaw, unfortunately. Does anything happen to him in this game? Like, just throwing it out there, just a quick yes or no answer.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
All right. I mean, for his sake, I hope not. I really do, because he's taken enough abuse over the past 2 years. But that's it for us. I mean, we kind of hit everything in between technical difficulties, me throwing my hands up in frustration, and cameos from my mother and my dog. So, all in all, I think another great podcast, right?
Yeah. The internet tried to get us down, but it failed.
Yeah, it must have been Johnny Manziel. Something must have happened.
Yeah, he broke the internet again.
Yeah, he broke my internet. Anyway, that's another edition of the Extra Point Podcast. We'll be back next Friday whenever we deem it necessary between the times of 2:30 and 5:30. So we'll let you know about an hour before, because that's usually our shtick. But if you want to tweet at us, AGBerg12 for me, at Blue Collar God for Adam, at Zachary Benau for Zach, and go to Mike Green's LinkedIn page. Maybe his Facebook page too. I'm sure it's wonderful.
Yeah, or just write a letter.
Yeah, you know what? Slip him a DM. Slip him a little direct message.
Make it personal.
Yeah.
Get on
Pony.
that. All right, so for the Extra Point Podcast, that's all for us. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving also, and have a good weekend.